morning, Sacramento. Welcome to All Things Legal on Money 105.5, the Wall Street Business Network. If you've never listened to this show before, this is where curious personal injury attorneys distill topical events into the legal essence. What does that mean? Well, as I said, we're curious. We like to read outside of our office. We are a very busy personal injury firm. I think we have anywhere between 600 and 800 clients at any given time. Large staff, 5 extremely well-versed attorneys in personal injury law. But guess what? We realize it's a pretty narrow topic, so we kind of broaden the horizons to at least make this hour interesting for you, or at the very least, improve your Jeopardy game. I'm joined this morning by my colleague, Tim Hodson, who still plays fast pitch baseball.
Fast pitch baseball, yes. First practice was last week, and we're getting started again, much to our wives' happiness.
And trying to turn around the drought you recall the Sacramento Floods, right?
That is correct, yes.
And it's not because you have a penchant for short pants.
No, we actually, I don't think anyone wears the short pants on our team. We all have the baseball slacks, as they call it.
Nice.
And then, as we always say, very few times in your life when you want a shady attorney on your side. But this morning's one of them, Edward Shady, joining us again. Thanks for joining us, Ed.
Good morning, Sacramento.
And as Denise, your wife, said, we got to cut the intro short, which I agree. Denise, that was very good advice. So let's get into the ideas.
She's going to kill me.
And you know what? And she's going to Mallorca to do Ironman Mallorca, which is an island off the coast of Spain. And she's going to come with my beautiful girlfriend, Tanya, who speaks Spanish. So, Denise, don't worry. She keeps us out of trouble. I've traveled the globe with her to Cambodia, to Thailand, to Mexico, to Spain. And knock on wood, I've yet to get into any appreciable trouble because Tanya can talk basically anybody into anything, keeping us all out of trouble.
Thank goodness.
All right, so let's go ahead and start the breakdown of what we're going to talk about today.
Our trusted advisor.
All right, so we've got our first article is High Times in the Capital City. Sacramento really is kind of taking the lead here in regards to dealing with the organization of how we deal with medical marijuana. And then on top of that, they're anticipating the approval of a ballot measure, which is probably going to be on the ballot in November for recreational marijuana in California, following the lead of Colorado, Washington, and I believe this probably is ironic in that federal law says marijuana is I think it's a class 1.
Schedule 1, yeah.
Schedule 1, yeah.
Narcotic, which says that there's no scientifically beneficial medical reason for marijuana to be used. It's like heroin. Which to me is ridiculous. I mean, we really need to spend some money and do some studies on this. Because I grew up in the 80s. That's when I was in college, and Tim, you just got out of high school, right?
Yeah, no, about 20 years ago.
I can see the FDA drug trials. I'll sign up.
So the anecdotal observation, me going to Berkeley, you going to Chico State, and Ed, you went to
Cal State Fullerton.
Fullerton, right? So you're in Orange County, so you
we
probably
were
didn't
dry.
know what marijuana was.
We had a pub on campus. We didn't need it.
So the anecdotal observation is you give 10 people a shot of tequila and 10 people a couple puffs of marijuana, and you're worried about violence or bad behavior. I'm going to stay away from the tequila drinkers, right?
Yeah, yes.
Definitely.
And so tequila's legal, marijuana's not. So here's the thing. We just need to do some studies on this. Is it really medically beneficial? Or what are the side effects to this stuff? Because it's going to be legalized, and what's going to happen is we're going to have a federal supremacy issue where the states are going to be beholden to the next executive. So let's say Ted Cruz gets elected. I mean, there's a potentiality that Colorado, Washington, and what I was bringing up is the irony is Washington, D.C.
Right,
It's
right
legal to recreationally use marijuana in the federal capital when federal law says it is not to be used. So the point is we need to reconcile that, and Sacramento is recognizing that we're moving in direction of legalization, and so they have ideas now in regards to where we're going to put the growing warehouses in Sacramento and how they're going to be regulated and how we're going to tax it. So we'll talk about that. Then we will talk about autonomous vehicles. More news. Sacramento is one of 77 cities out of 19,354 that's applied for a grant from the federal government to look at transportation networks and self-driving cars. So you can use an Uber-like app, you hit it, a self-driving car will pick you up and take you to light rail. So you're more inclined to use it because the studies say if you're a half mile away or more, you're more likely not to use light rail or any other public transit. Pretty cool idea. And if Sacramento, one of 77 cities out of 19,000 that applied, gets that, there's $50 million going to Sacramento. New federal laws, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, ultimately is determined that federally speaking, you don't need a steering wheel, and that the manufacturer of the software and the hardware and the vehicle is going to be responsible for liability, not the driver. California's rules are different. The new rules proposed by the DMV are, in California, you have to have a driver, somebody who's behind the wheel that's able to take control of the vehicle in the event of a mishap. The federal rules are you don't need a steering wheel. And so the only issues are now brake pedals and handbrake or foot brake, and because they aren't addressed, they're going to have to apply for an exception to that rule. But the federal rules are where Google wants to go. California, which is arguably the biggest market, has a different approach, so those need to be reconciled. And so that is interesting. Then we'll also talk about a Sacramento Bee a reporter went on to Google Self-Drive and talk about some of the things that you really don't think about. How does rain impact a self-driving car? How about snow? And those are going to be interesting things, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Lance Armstrong. Ultimately, he was basically banned from all competition under USADA, which is the United States Anti-Doping Administration or agency, and said, look, bottom line, you had a concerted effort, the largest in the history of sport, whereby you conspired to cheat through blood transfusions, EPO, human growth hormone, testosterone, etc. You're out. You basically have to forfeit everything you've ever done, and you are banned from any event that USADA sanctioned. Well, we get the Western States 100, a 100-mile race, the premier ultra running race in the world. Started in 1973 as a equestrian event, 100 miles. The ultimate person who is a progenitor of the Western States 100, Gordy Ansley.
SAT
SAT
word,
word, yeah.
progenitor.
Progenitor. Hey, you guys finally woke up. I used the word.
Hey.
You go, hey, what is he saying?
I had to go through the Rolodex
Right there.
in my head real quick. Like, what
Right
does that
from
mean?
the Latin, the primogenitor, firstborn
So
son.
this race goes from Squaw Valley to Auburn, and Gordy Ansley, in 1973, his horse went lame, so he ran it. And he just said, hey, let's do this. And so it started in 1974. Lance Armstrong is going to be pacing Eric Burns, who is a former baseball player, I think, with the A's, grew up in Redwood City.
Yeah, A's, Giants, Red Sox. He played a lot. He was playing the league for about 10, 15 years.
So Eric Burns is going to do the Western States 100, I believe, and so Lance Armstrong is in Auburn pacing him for 20 miles. So they finally had to address this, and the Western States 100 said, look, if you've been banned, you can't participate in our event either. And so Lance Armstrong really needs to do something to petition USADA, say, look, I need to share some information with you because this lifetime ban, it's not fair. I mean, because everybody was doping in the Tour de France. He was just an idiot through the process, really hurting other people's lives. But that's not doping. That's just being an idiot. And an idiot shouldn't be legally actionable within this confine. So he needs to do something so he can get back into these things. Because if he's clean, a lifetime ban, he's the only guy suffering that. Everybody on his team was doping, or most of them, and at the end of the day, they're not banned for life. So we'll take a look at the Western States 100, what they've done, and the legal issues associated with that. We'll talk about a lawsuit from the caddies and the PGA who didn't want to use wear the logos of the sponsoring corporation at each event. They claimed antitrust. Judge said, nope, you signed a contract, that's out. We'll talk about the legal issues there. And then we'll go ahead and talk about this doctor in Southern California who got 30 years to life in prison for second-degree murder as a result of overprescription of pain medication. It is a tragic thing that happens. I just got done watching a documentary on HBO, and you see these kids are in Massachusetts, right? They get in a car accident. They're prescribed Vicodin, then Norco, then oxycodone, and then guess what? They get hooked, and they don't know where to go. The doctor's not prescribing anymore, so where do they go? They go to the streets and start doing heroin. And this is a real major problem. Doctors are awesome, perform a great service, but some of them overprescribe these medications, and these people trade a pain for a lifetime of addiction, which is now going to lead to heroin addiction. So we'll talk about that and the landmark case where a doctor actually got convicted of second-degree murder for overprescription as a result of the overdoses of her patients. All
First
right,
time ever.
so hopefully that is something that will entice you. And we've got President's Day weekend coming up. As you know, George Washington is my great-great-great-great-great-uncle.
Never
so
heard
we
it.
get to celebrate his birthday on Monday.
He might be your uncle, but he's the father of my country.
All right, so and I know that $5 will get me a cup of coffee at Starbucks, but it's interesting nonetheless. So we'll come back and we'll talk about what's going on here in Sacramento, and we'll do that in about 2 or 3 minutes. This is Craig Ashton. It's All Things Legal on Money 105.5. All right, we're back. This is Craig Ashton. The show is All Things Legal, Money 105.5, the Wall Street Business Network. I like the music. It's actually kind of soothing and stimulates the intellectual strain of the show. No, you guys
little
looked
jazz
at me.
drumming there. Yeah.
You guys looked at me dumbfoundedly, saying intellectualism in this show probably oxymoronic.
Yes.
Again, silence. All right, so that's exactly how
like
radio
a-
should be
it's like a
done.
Jeb Bush rally,
Thanks a lot for adding a lot
silence.
to the show, guys. I see if I can communicate to the listeners.
Can
the
you clap
blank look
now?
on your
Yeah.
faces.
Please clap. That was funny.
Yeah. Blank looks do not translate well, although we are being videotaped for YouTube. So if you want to see the blank, one of the very few times that lawyers are silent, apparently I have the gift of making lawyers silent.
Well, you talk so much, it's hard for us to get it in.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's move on to the
You're
first
off the hook
topic.
now, Denise.
Denise, you're going to love Spain. Yeah, we're going to check out Salvador Dali, Antonio Gaudi, Sagrada Familia. We'll go back to Catalonia. We'll check out where Picasso painted, have
His
Copa
Blue
di Vino
Mood.
Tinto. So bottom line is, do not be afraid, Denise. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the first issue here. We got high times in the capital city. So last week, the city council voted to approve cultivation permits for medical clinics to grow indoors within city limits. And so, according to an individual who speaks for the medicinal marijuana lobby, they say the average dispensary brings $104,000 a year in extra tax revenue to the city per dispensary. So the idea is that Sacramento is being smart, I think, right? Because this is already going on. Medical marijuana is legal in California. New rules have been passed to kind of regulate it better because it was a little bit of a mishmash to begin with. And, you know, we were talking because one of the reasons Sacramento's got this renaissance, and I was adding it up this morning, there's probably about $2.5 billion in investment going in. Well, you got the arena, that $800 million that just went in for the Sutter building. We got Kaiser putting in a $500 million new hospital. We may have another $500 million put in for a soccer arena.
Courthouse.
We got the courthouse at
courthouse.
$500 million.
The Wynn Resort. That's going to be
And
next
then
to
all
the-
these different new restaurants and hotels, and then now Third and Capital is being developed. So the moral of the story is without the legal issues associated with franchise or franchisee, contract, antitrust, eminent domain, we're dealing with election law, we're dealing with California Environmental Quality Act. If all those things don't fall into line, you don't get $2.5 billion in investment. Then you got blight downtown, and people going, you know what? Sacramento's going in the wrong direction, and you probably are not going to have a city council with enough wherewithal to say, look, let's go ahead and make it easier for medicinal marijuana to be grown, but let's tax it. Because people go, look, our city's going to HELL in a handbasket, and we don't want to now promote drug use, right? But now because everything's going right, they're saying, look, let's be realistic about this. This is happening, and so what they've done is they said, and I think this is fair, it's allowed indoors, not outdoors. It's going to have to be a warehouse of 22,000 square feet or less, and it's going to be in an area zoned for agricultural or commercial use, and it can't be within 600 feet of a school or a park. Seems reasonable.
It's reasonable. It's also a necessary evil. Part of the laws that have been written, I believe it's either 2018 or 2019, you can't grow out of the same place you're selling. And so if you're having a dispensary right now you can have a cultivation in the back and you can come out and sell it. But I believe it's 2018, the dispensaries can only be basically a place to sell them. They can't be. You can't also be growing them there as well. So this is also a necessary evil, but it's a smart way to backdoor it into a tax initiative.
So basically, they join a collective, right? And they all have prescriptions for marijuana, and then the collective has a need per month for marijuana.
Correct.
And then they contract out to these cultivation groups who will grow the marijuana to supply the medicine, as it's called, for these dispensaries.
Right, and that's the way they're trying to set it up. And they're also going to be able to, because they're doing that, be able to tax it on two separate levels. You're taxing the cultivation and the sell. So it's smart. I mean, if you're going to do it, you might as well raise revenue while you're doing it.
I would like to see a statistical analysis of the uptick in people eating out after the medicinal marijuana happens in downtown Sacramento.
Benihana's is going through the roof, yes.
If you do recall, there was that Girl Scout, record-breaking sale of Girl Scout cookies because she set her stand-up outside of a dispensary.
That's a smart girl right there, man. That girl is very smart.
Yeah, she sold a lot of cookies.
I'm sure she did.
That's funny.
But does that go against the Girl Scout ethics? I mean,
Hey,
I don't know.
she's raising money for a good
It's
cause.
good. Yeah, I mean, I don't care. It
Come
doesn't
on, the
bother me.
city's using the same argument for the children. They're taking the high road on this one.
That's a great segue, Mr. Shady, by the way. Great segue.
All right, so now we've got these new rules that have been proposed in terms of where you can grow medicinal marijuana. And then there is another proposal of a 5% tax, which instead of going into the general fund for Sacramento will ultimately go to youth services, including homeless and foster youth. And it could generate millions of dollars for such programs. Right now, less than 1% of the city's general budget goes to those things. This would be 5% of the taxes from medicinal marijuana will go to the kids. So that will raise a lot of money for at-risk youth. I think it's a great idea. I mean, that's really what should be done.
I think it's a good idea, but I can't see it passing. I can't see it. I can see the commercials in my head right now that's going to go against this initiative is, drugs supporting children. I can see it now. I mean, it's a good start. It's going in the right direction. I think it's disgusting that only 1% of the general fund goes towards these kind of programs.
Okay, let's assume it doesn't pass. But the way they drafted the proposal, it says his marijuana tax resolution asserts that the city has, and in quotes, a significant at-risk youth population. So he's not opining, he's actually stating a fact. So assume this doesn't pass. What's he going to do for this significant at-risk youth population? I mean, so
I don't know.
The city's actually declaring that they have this problem. So even if this doesn't pass, they're going to have to now address what they've admitted.
Well, I mean, if you're going to be smart about it, which sometimes the people that run things aren't very
Talking
smart.
politicians.
I know,
come
but
on.
if you're going to be smart about it, have the 5% tax, just market it as a 5% tax on marijuana. I don't think anyone's going to have a problem voting for that. And then raise the percentage of the general fund that goes towards these programs. Don't have it be a direct link because it's just going to get muddied if selling marijuana is going to be a direct link to helping children at risk. I mean, I can see the argument. I can see the commercials now. I can see them in my head. I mean, it's almost. I agree with you. I like it, but it's just from a practical standpoint, it's the say it out loud test. It just doesn't. I don't think
It's kind of funny
fly.
because the federal government sets marijuana as a Schedule I drug, and Schedule I is the highest or most regulated as opposed to 2, 3,
Yeah, it says
4.
there's
It's the opposite.
no redeeming benefit at all banned like heroin.
It's the same level as heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, all that. It's listed with those
Ridiculous.
drugs.
Yeah,
And alcohol is legal.
It's
Think about it.
yeah.
40,000 or 80,000 people
Well, there's a lot of
die a year
benefits.
in auto accidents because of drunk drivers. I mean, it's like 40,000. I think as many people almost have died in Vietnam, right?
Oh,
And it's legal.
And it's legal. And highly, 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 highly profitable. And the winner
And
of
taxed.
and the winner of the Super Bowl
Yeah, he's drinking Budweiser.
just
Ooh.
said he was going to go drink a bunch of Budweiser.
That's not
How
good.
much money do you need, right? I think he's got a Budweiser distributorship, so I mean, he takes that moment to actually
He's smart,
endorse.
man.
I mean,
He's
he's
a smart
He's
guy.
a great marketer. You should
He's
appreciate
a
that. I
multimillionaire,
mean,
dude. Just,
talking about
back
Peyton
off
here.
the capitalism and just enjoy the moment for a second.
I guess
right?
he owns
Yeah.
like 5,000 Papa John's too. So like even when he does
God.
Papa
You see
John's commercials,
Papa John, he
was- yeah.
shook his hand.
That's his business partner,
oh,
man.
God.
Marketing.
Hey, but like us, it was kind of weird. We were talking off the air.
Welcome to diabetes.
The U.S. government says that marijuana is a Schedule I drug. Therefore, highly illegal. The city council here in the capital city is getting together with individuals, the private industry or the private sector, and saying, "Hey, we want you to grow it so that we can tax it." Does that not fall into the premise of a conspiracy under
I
the
feel
penal
like I'm
code?
speaking with Shakespeare. Does
Yeah.
that not?
2 or more persons involved in committing a crime. Growing marijuana would be a crime under federal law. So it sounds to me like the city council and growers would be committing a conspiracy.
So
Yes.
are you saying we live in the ultimate rebel city?
Oh, absolutely.
I
Can you
like
maybe?
it.
And Ted Cruz Republicans do not like California much.
No.
So I mean, if they wanted to go after the capital of the state that they probably hate the most,
They're going to lose this state anyway, so who cares?
no, but I'm talking the federal.
Yeah.
They say to the Department of Justice, look, like you said, that this is basically 2 or more people violating federal law.
Correct.
This is conspiracy, and I could see that happening. Ted Cruz is a lawyer, right?
Anything's possible.
Yeah. He was actually the solicitor for the state of Texas.
He was.
I've seen Jerry Brown perp walked.
High as a kite.
The whole city council doing the elephant
Yeah.
walk. Yeah, in their orange
Re-energy this,
jumpsuits.
Jerry.
Yeah, open up the city council chambers and a whiff of smoke comes out.
Yeah, you're gonna experience some climate change there, Jerry. It's gonna be in a padded, air-conditioned cell.
I mean, because it's kind of weird, because it's either commit a crime or commit any act injurious to the public health or the public morals. So depending on where you fall on the line on this, it's kind of a weird coincidence that the city's engaged in something that, by definition, is illegal.
That's true. And that is the supremacy clause of federal law being incongruous with state law. Somebody needs to step up, and if Obama is going to live to his progressive ideals before he leaves office, you should put that in front of Congress. Say, look, man, you vote on it, because the young vote, that's going to really solidify them to the Democrats. If the Republicans say, look, because they're always talking about state rights this, state rights that, make it a state rights issue. Federal law no longer prohibits marijuana, and walk the walk, man.
That would be the way I would throw it down and say this shouldn't be a federal issue.
Right now, it's not.
Leave it to the states.
My great uncle wouldn't stand for this. The bottom line
The
is,
father of my country wouldn't either.
because it's inconsistent.
It is,
and it's not fair. Bottom line, if you're a states' rights, which all the Republicans say they are, then let Colorado and Washington and California, if we do it, and Hawaii and Alaska and Washington D.C., if that's the direction they want to go, then let them police that issue. It's no longer a federal issue, and that's the way it should go.
and it's not like it's becoming a problem in those areas either.
Yeah, it's not.
No.
Hey, come on, your great uncle. What was the first rebellion that he actually put down with federal troops?
Was it
the Whiskey Rebellion.
Right, and I think he used a lot of hemp too.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, it's got to be 2/3. It's going to be an initiative in Sacramento. So 2/3 of the voters in the city of Sacramento have to pass that because it's a tax hike. And then there's a proposal for 15% sales tax now on medical marijuana, which would be consistent with what's going in the November ballot for recreational. Because what happened in Colorado is that there's a different tax on medical marijuana than recreational. So guess what everybody was doing? Getting a prescription, buying the medical marijuana was less expensive.
Yep.
And so that provided an incentive to go around the rules. So now it's 15% straight up. Right now it's $1 billion industry. It's going to be $3 or $4 billion. I mean, that's going to be $600 million to $1 billion a year in taxes of a market that already exists. I mean, the bottom line, it's already going on.
Already
so
happening.
you might as well tax it, regulate it, use the money in a smart, consistent way, and that's just how it should be done. And those are the rules that are happening. And as long as they're not taking advantage of the product they're trying to legalize, it will happen.
I agree. I think it's going to happen eventually. I mean, a big part of it is law enforcement. They've got to be able to prove, and insurance lobbies as well, when it comes to DUIs and stuff like that. They're getting really close to being able to prove if you're actually under the influence of marijuana at the time.
We're going to segue now. If people are smoking marijuana, we're going to need driverless cars, and we'll go ahead and segue into that issue when we come back. This is All Things Legal. All right, we like it. This is Money 105.5, the Wall Street Business Network. You're swinging with the lawyer from Ashton & Price. I'm Craig Ashton. We got Tim Hodson and Edward Shady in the house. And ultimately, we just got done speaking about high times in the capital city and the anticipation of new, yeah, right. And Gerald, we call him G, our producer, is making the universal sign of you've been smoking marijuana.
All right, G.
All right, G. And nice music, by the way, this morning. All right, so we just got done speaking about the anticipation
There you go. Have some more coffee.
of Sacramento realizing that probably recreational marijuana is coming and medical marijuana is already here, taxing it, regulating it, etc. I think a very good idea. And then we talked about states' rights and the supremacy clause. And if Republicans really want to be consistent, and they talk about states' rights, they use that in regards to same-sex marriage, right? Saying it's not a right, it's to be determined by the states, and it's not a right that is enumerated either directly or indirectly through the Constitution. The Supreme Court disagreed. So they say, look, the states should decide it. So if you're going to be consistent on that, then the states should decide medical marijuana, quit with the federal stuff. It's time to move on because this is going to happen no matter what, and you can streamline the process and take away the sword of Damocles, which is criminal prosecution. Our system's already overwhelmed. All right, so basically,
That was your public service announcement.
Yeah, I mean, you could go on forever about it because they're already releasing people from jail because it's overcrowded. So let's just keep putting people more in for marijuana use. It's just
Ridiculous.
we could talk for hours about
has
it.
a fight ever broken out at a Grateful Dead concert?
Not maybe if someone stole someone's bag or something. Maybe I don't know, man. But
Fighting over maybe a hot dog.
those were my beads.
All right, so anyway, let's get serious. So autonomous vehicles, we've been talking about this on our show for quite some time. Technology is moving very quickly. We've got Facebook, we've got Yelp, we've got Twitter, we've got Instagram. There's issues regarding defamation. regarding tortious interference with contractual relations. We have the issue of whether or not ISIS is using our technology to recruit individuals and what the legal rules should be in that regard. And now we've got drones, and we've got new drone laws. And now we have autonomous vehicles that the various jurisdictions across the country are trying to ferret out the appropriate rules. California is determined, at least as it applies to autonomous vehicles once they're on the road, that you got to have a steering wheel, and you got to have a person that's capable of driving the vehicle sitting in the driver's seat, and that's going to be a requirement. The new federal law has just come out, which is NHTSA, which is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and they have determined that computers that control cars of the future can be considered drivers. So in California, if a car gets in an accident under the DMV proposed rules, the manufacturer is not responsible. It's the person who owns the vehicle and is sitting behind the steering wheel. The federal rule, which is now incongruous to the California rule, says that cars are going to be basically driven by the computer, which would be Google or Microsoft, whoever, Apple, whoever's doing it. And that creates a whole new area of liability. So starting out with what's in the Sacramento Bee this morning, there are 19,000 and change cities in the United States. 77 of them have applied for a federal grant that is going to be looking at self-driving cars linked to light rail. One of the issues in using public transportation is you got to walk, and we're a suburban area here in Sacramento. You got to walk at a half mile or a couple miles to get to light rail, and then it kind of defeats the purpose if you're driving to get to public transportation. So the idea is that there's $50 million that's available to the city that gets chosen to develop a prototype of an Uber or a Lyft type app where you hit it and an autonomous vehicle shows up at your door and then takes you to public transit. I think that's pretty cool. So that just shows you how Sacramento is moving in the right direction. We would not be in this position, in my mind, without all the legal issues that are associated with that initial investment in the arena, which led to all the other billions of dollars that have now been flooded in. And now Sacramento's going to look, there's 19,000 cities out there. We're going to be one of 77 that's going to apply for this, and we're well suited for it because we got Vivek Ranadive, Qualcomm, Facebook people doing the arena downtown. We just got two Silicon Valley companies. I think it's Flipbox, and then another that does an application for early detection of cancer, and they're moving to Sacramento. So the tide is changing. So Sacramento now is one of 19,000 cities, one of 77 that actually applied for this grant. I think it's pretty cool. What do you think?
No, I think it's great. I won't steal Ed's thunder, but Ed came up with a great deterrent for it. But I mean, I think it's great, especially if you're at a Kings game and you want to jump on a bus or light rail. I think it's going to be well for that.
Great idea.
But as always, Ed's always thinking about how people are going to abuse the system. And you had a good point. You had a really good point, Ed, about it.
And how do you send letters to yourself?
I don't. From jail? No, I don't. 'Cause I'm never there. Now, I was saying how you could possibly game the system because most light rail stations are in a commercial setting, either business offices, but more likely retail. And if you're a mile or two away and you don't want to walk over, you call this autonomous car, picks you up, takes you down. You can do your shopping and never get on public transportation and then take the same autonomous car home.
And part of this is the autonomous cars, but there's also technology for smart traffic control signals, which can monitor the traffic and change the light sequence to allow for better flow of traffic.
I'm all for that.
And that technology already exists, but it's not used very much. So Sacramento's application also includes a request for funds for that.
That's awesome. I'm all for that, 100%.
So it looks like the top 5 finalists will be announced on March 12th, and then they're going to be given $100,000 to hone their proposals. And it'd be really cool if Sacramento got this because we'll be leading in regards to traffic because that's one of the things for the arena that's going to be super helpful. And you're going to have a lot of guys in the private sector that are going to be helping with that.
Yes.
And then you've got this autonomous vehicle thing to get you to light rail, which I think is great.
I think it's great. It's definitely great for investment and keeps putting Sacramento on the map, and I'm down for anything like that. But just kind of revisit what you were talking about earlier. I think once again, as we always talk about, California seems to be ahead of the eight ball on this. I mean, why does it make sense to allow the car to operate by itself and not have an emergency steering wheel? It just doesn't. Why would you not be required to have someone? And as you were talking about the B article, I don't want to jump ahead, but when it starts raining, that Google car he was in started freaking out because of the radio waves and the rains interrupting
Well,
it.
they're in the Google's argument is, look, it's autonomous.
Well, yeah, 'cause
which
of
means
course-
a human doesn't drive this thing.
But-
So you're defeating the purpose because the computer is going to be safer.
No.
And that's what they said.
No.
So
Sorry.
I mean, bottom line is I've had a lot of interesting conversations with Siri, and usually 50% of the time she's not giving me what I'm asking
No,
for.
my phone, our
But
computers.
I did learn the
mean-
capital of Bulgaria, Sofia.
I mean, things, the phones, computers. I mean, light, everything constantly that's dealt with computers has problems, has glitches. It's part of the process of it, and I mean, as convenient as they are, they do have that element of failure. And for the federal government to
Completely. I had to reset my Wi-Fi for
Yeah,
the
I mean,
85th time this week
it doesn't make any. I mean,
at
it's
my
just-
house.
It's something that can easily be hacked into. They're not even close. A lot of the stuff we've talked about, they're not even close to having it foolproof technology. And for the federal government, I'm sure someone has a lot of investment in Google to allow this to pass. Is just baffling to me. It shouldn't be, but it's baffling to me that they're not required to have someone sit in the driver's seat in case and when it goes haywire, they can't prevent grandma or my dog or someone else from getting hit because this car just in the rain wants to take a left because it's raining.
Ed, what do you got?
Why are you baffled? Bernie Sanders has been saying this for the entire time, that if you give large donations like $27, you can get the legislation that you want.
No, it's clear where the motivation was for this law to pass in the federal government. And
Motivation was $27.
It is. It's money. It's money. And it's just, thank you, California, for having the brains to make sure someone's behind the wheel of an quote unquote autonomous
Yeah,
vehicle.
because the rub of that is that there's somebody behind the wheel, then the same insurance issues apply. So if a car gets in an accident, it's a driver's insurance that's responsible, not the manufacturer. But a really good argument can be made that products liability is going to apply because products liability doesn't
Either
go
way,
away. And it's if the vehicle is more dangerous than a reasonable consumer would expect, and if you're driving to Fairfield and you end up getting an accident in Tijuana because your car has hijacked you, I think that's a pretty good case.
No, I agree. There's going to be a combo. I mean, for the world we live in, it's going to be combo insurance.
It's also a misnomer. It's not autonomous because no matter what, that vehicle is going to rely on outside inputs.
Absolutely.
Whether it is using like LiDAR technology to read the vehicle ahead of it, it is actually going to be, there's something there from the outside can come in and influence how the decision-making processor in that vehicle operates.
Yeah, so basically what's interesting is we were talking, the proposed rules are not rules yet, but the proposed rules in California are the driver's going to be legally responsible for what happens with the autonomous vehicle. You have to have a steering wheel, which Google argued against. Say, look, we have the technology. We want it to go in that direction because they want to jump on the market, right? So they want to be ahead of Audi. They want to be ahead of Honda. They want to be ahead of Apple because they've got a technology that they believe does not require brakes, a steering wheel, nothing. You just sit in the car.
No thanks.
But the interesting thing is that because there's going to be issues. I mean, if you go to a bar and you're drunk and your car's really driving you, is it fair to hold you responsible for drunk driving just because you're sitting behind the steering wheel?
No.
Is it?
No.
Well,
But California says that you're responsible.
But
Right,
if you have the ability to take over control of that vehicle, yes.
But if the whole point of the autonomous vehicle is so to allow someone to be able to get in the car and get home without having to drive it and kill somebody, then it makes sense. But I mean, it's tough. I mean, I'm glad I'm not writing the laws on it. It's tough. I mean,
No, but if you remove the brakes, the accelerator, there is no clutch in these vehicles, and a steering wheel, who cares what type of capacity the person is in it because
right.
they can never take over the vehicle.
because California those aren't the rules. That's the federal rules. So there's also the disabled community, right?
Because our senators and congressmen are always drunk, and we wouldn't want them taking over that.
Some people in the disabled community are simply not able to operate a vehicle, but
Right.
this autonomous vehicle under the Google rules, which is no steering wheel, you're not responsible for what goes on the vehicle, allows them this freedom that they've never had before. And in California, that won't exist because if they're behind the wheel, they have to be able to take control of the vehicle, and so their disability will preclude them, and they may have a ADA case.
and I could totally sympathize with that. I mean, it's not going to be easy.
It's discriminatory for
It
sure.
is.
I mean,
No,
if
it
the
is.
technology exists, and we adopt a rule that says, even though the technology exists, and in Nevada perhaps you can go ahead and get behind the wheel of an autonomous vehicle, California you can't.
Well, why can't they? It could be a special license, just like you have a special permit to have a handicap license plate. You could have a special permit to not.
These are issues.
yeah.
This is the legal issue. That's why this show is so great.
There you go. There you have
All
it.
right. So, and I was also reading an article by Tony Bizgel, I think his name is.
That's a Polish name. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that is a Polish name.
But very interesting. He went on a Google car run, And he said it was interesting to see that when they pulled out of the parking lot at Google, even though there's nobody around, the car stopped. So there's no such thing as a California stop. I mean, you stop. He said when there was a person walking next to a stroller, the car moved over to the left and around it and slowed down. It said that really one of the things that I didn't know, because Google doesn't disclose these things, we know that they got pulled over for going 24 and a 35. We know that they got rear-ended because they stopped short for somebody who looked like they were stepping into a crosswalk, and they got rear-ended. So it may be the Google car's fault for essentially overreacting to a non-danger, right?
Well, to a certain level.
Being rear-ended, now you're falling too close for the conditions that exist.
Well, it could be some comparative.
Maybe 10%, maybe.
That.
Yeah, but no, it'd be tough.
The point is that, in most rear-end collisions, unless you're backing up, the other party's responsible for sure. But if there's a deer 50 yards off the freeway and you hit your brakes right away and you get rear-ended, then probably you can make an argument that person acted in a way that was not reasonable and not to be anticipated, and there's some responsibility on the person that stopped short. So anyway,
you're still supposed to be following a safe
the
distance.
interesting thing, and we'll talk about this when we come back before we make the transition to Lance Armstrong. We'll talk about some of the limitations that were in this article about autonomous vehicles and the weather, which I think is pretty interesting. So you're going to create some issues regarding how we legislate this. This is Craig Ashton with Tim Hodson and Ed Shady, All Things Legal. We'll see you back after the break.
It's All Things Legal with Craig Ashton from the law firm of Ashton and Price on Money 105.5.
All right, we're back. This is Money 105.5, the Wall Street Business Network. I'm Craig Ashton. Show us all things legal. We're curious personal injury attorneys distill topical events into their legal essence. I'm joined by my colleagues Tim Hodson and Edward Shady.
Good to be here.
Howdy ho.
That's a good song. Was that the Mamas and the Papas? Who
I think so.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. Youngbloods. Oh, there we go. Well, that's why we are not DJs and we are professional attorneys. All right, so here's a couple things that I learned reading this article, which is kind of interesting. The weather plays a large role right now in the way these autonomous vehicles operate. So according to the Bee, said when there are rain puddles and they splash, the car doesn't know what to do and it gets confused. And when the car gets confused, it pulls over. So if it's snowing, if it's raining, how about those guys? I have a convertible. I just recently sold it, right? Beautiful day, going to work. And invariably, these guys with the leaf blowers turn around and start blowing all the dirt and dust into the road, into my car,
They're doing that because you're a 1%er.
Yeah, they're looking at me going, look at that guy in the bow tie.
That's not really real world
convertible
problems.
Porsche. Let's give him some dust. He deserves it. And they got the earphones on, so they even if they can't hear or see me, they pretend like I don't exist. So the point is that
deniability.
So I guess that's what happens when you drive a convertible Porsche, right? So moral of the story is this: that when the leaf blower is blowing out into the street, does that confuse the Google car? When it's raining, when there are puddles, when it's snowing, does that confuse the Google car? And when it does, you can't use that vehicle. So the steering wheel becomes important, that you can switch off, because that car, as the technology stands right now, according to the anecdotal information in the Sacramento Bee, is that if it's raining or it's snowing, when there's a difficulty with the sensors to determine exactly the orientation as to where the vehicle is, it's inoperable. So you don't want to have a car that's not operable during the winter, because it's just going to be sitting there. So the steering wheel becomes very important.
I have no patience to begin with, and if my car started pulling over for no reason because it was raining or because there was a puddle in front of me, that would not be a good morning for me, let's put it that way.
How was your commute? It took me 5 hours to get to work.
My head exploded, and it took me 5 hours.
My neighbor keeps turning the sprinklers on to piss me off. I can't get out of the driveway.
Right. Here comes the Google car, spray it.
I mean, as we always say, as great as an idea as this is, they are a long, long way from this being foolproof technology to where it can be on the road, to where a majority of people can be in these kind of cars. Because, it rains a lot. And puddles happen, and snow happens, and dogs crossing the street happens, and random flashes of light happen. There's so many things that could trigger the motion sensors on these cars that, could you imagine 15 cars all of a sudden pulling over off the side of the road because it's raining for no reason and you can't control it? It's going to be...
Yeah, so President Obama's asked for $4 billion over the next decade to start supporting this technology. So it's happening. if it works, it's going to be great. But there's a lot of things going on, a lot of legislation that needs to occur. We got to determine whether or not you sit behind the wheel or not, whether or not you're DUI if you're drunk with the car's driving, or you're smoking marijuana. What about kids? You don't want to drive your 12-year-old to school anymore. The car takes them. Is that child endangerment? I mean, how do all these things work, right? So we're going to have to muddle our way through, but it's a little bit premature because we don't even know how functional these vehicles are going to be. And obviously the companies that are touting it are talking about how great it is. But at the end of the day, we're all familiar with technology. And I mean, not to say that IT guys haven't saved us many, many times, but I find that a lot of times all you do is turn your computer off and turn it back on. Hey, guess what starts working again? Same thing with DirecTV. It's another good thing.
It is, yeah. DirecTV always
turn
just
it on,
reset
turn
it.
it off, boom,
Yeah.
it's on.
Just reset it. Yeah, thanks. I was on hold for 15 minutes. You told me to reset it.
But I did learn a lot about Bangladesh.
The game is over.
All right, so let's talk about real quickly. The caddies grouped together in the PGA and said, look, it's not fair. There's 168 of us. You're making us wear. Unfortunately, we don't really back Buick. We're not in for Fords, man. We don't like Corona. And so they're saying, look, we don't want to be wearing the sponsor's logo on our caddy uniforms. Judge says, look, you've indicated that you think this is a trademark or an antitrust issue where free commerce is not being engaged in. Guess what? You signed a contract. It wasn't unconscionable. You weren't under duress. It's enforceable. Thanks for coming. I'll use a 9-iron.
Yeah.
I thank you, Judge, by the way, for making that decision. I mean, if you're at the Buick Open and you are a caddy for the PGA, guess what? Your bib is going to say the Buick Open on it. I mean, let's move on and get real.
The judge says you don't get a mulligan. You're out of bounds. And that putt is good.
Yeah, and you're not allowed to drink any Cokes or Pepsis because there may be a logo on the cup you're using or any other thing. Like, it just gets ridiculous. And the car you drove to the tournament with that has the logo on the vehicle, you better take that off too, Mr. Caddy.
Yeah, and pick up your ball and move on.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about Lance
Gotta
Armstrong.
take the names off the balls too.
If you don't know Lance Armstrong, he rode for the
U.S. Postal Service.
U.S. Postal Service, won 7 Tour de France's in a row, really displaced some of the best riders in the world. Greg LeMond, who's from Reno, got shot by. All right, today is the anniversary of Dick Cheney shooting his friend in the face.
Wow.
And getting an apology.
Getting an apology. That's how the dark side works.
I'm sorry you shot me in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? You made me miss the pigeon. Now get out of here.
He's a real gangster.
He is, dude.
He
Shoot some of
rolls
the-
in a limo, shoots a guy in the face, and gets an apology.
gets an apology.
Assault and battery, clearly, if it's intentional, which it probably was knowing Dick Cheney. Joke, opinion, humor, satire, protected. Or an accident, then it's negligent shooting in the face.
Which one had to apologize for again?
I'm really sorry. I mean, that would
What
have
do you
been
think Dick would have done if he didn't apologize?
Who knows, man? Who knows?
You could have had that pheasant, but for my face getting ready to
We'll go deer
shot.
hunting next time, and I'll get you with the real.
So all the legal issues went away because of the force of Dick Cheney, right? So Lance Armstrong, Greg LeMond was shot in El Dorado Hills during a turkey hunt years ago and still came back and won the Tour de France one more time. Lance Armstrong getting involved in the Western States 100, basically pacing one of his buddies, Eric Burns, who's a former baseball player, on 20 miles, part of the loop. The 100 mile starts in Squaw Valley, goes all the way to Auburn.
Yeah.
You get 30 hours to finish. If you finish under 30 hours, but more than 24, you get a bronze belt buckle. You finish under 24 hours, you get a silver. Pretty unbelievable. The guy who started it, it was a horse trail run. His horse became lame. He ran it, made it, and just said, hey, let's do this. And 1974 it started. It's been going on ever since. So Lance Armstrong has been showing an inclination to get into ultra running because it's a similar mindset of suffering for a long period of time, which you do during the Tour de France, which is over 2,000 miles, going Alpe d'Huez and through the Alps and the Pyrenees, etc. These guys are unbelievable athletes, and they suffer a lot, and they've trained themselves to do so. So Lance Armstrong was kind of given an inclination that he might want to take part in the Western States 100. They took a look at it and said, you know what, we're just going to follow the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, and if you've been banned under any agency that takes a look at performance-enhancing drugs, etc., if you've been banned, you're not going to be able to participate in the Western States 100. Sorry, thanks for coming.
I mean, you and I disagree on this a little bit, but I'm all for it. I mean, the guy is the ultimate scumbag of scumbags. He ruined people's careers. He bankrupted people's businesses. all to hide and cover up a lie. And yes, I am you guys, you know me very well. I'm a huge baseball fan. So the argument that everybody was doing it works for me because everybody really was doing it. But his moral turpitude is zero, and the fact that he destroyed people's lives, I have no problem with him not being able to pursue some of his happiness in his life. I mean, that's just a personal opinion, but I mean,
Greg LeMond was talking about when he was racing against him at the end of his career, and he said, I think, let's just say it's Alpe d'Huez. It's one of the crazy climbs. Armstrong basically drops the entire field, and he says, look at the guy. You look at his eyes. He's not suffering. He's not even breathing hard. He's talking into his walkie-talkie. You can't do that and crush everybody unless you're basically doing something that's helping the oxygen transfer in your blood. And they were doing transfusions, which they would take their blood, which is highly oxygenated, lots of red blood cells, and then they would transfuse that just before the race. Or they would take EPO, which raises the red blood cell count and the oxygen transfer, or human growth hormone or testosterone, et cetera. And guess what? Almost everybody was doing it. But the way he went about it, and he kept denying it and took all this money for it and said other people were liars and frauds, that's the part that basically made the full force of the rules come down on him. And that's where we're at. So Lance Armstrong's in Auburn, but he's not going to be able to participate in the Western States 100. That's because of a legal issue through the U.S. ADA, and that's where we got there. We talked about high times in the Capitol, pretty interesting. Talked about autonomous cars, caddies. Basically, you got to wear the Buick logo. There's no way around it, right?
Nope.
So happy President's Weekend. And ultimately, I'm going to be doing something special for Valentine's Day. Hope you are too. If not, you're going to be in trouble on Monday. All right, This is Craig Ashton Show. It's all things legal.
What is a holiday?
I hope you enjoyed the show. And basically, join us next week, same bat time, same bat channel for the Frivolity.